Caleb Jones, and this is the Alpha Male 2.0 podcast. And for this episode, I have something special planned for you. For this podcast, I'm actually going to give you the unabridged chapters 1 and chapters 3 of the audiobook version of my new book coming out in late May called The Ultimate Open Marriage Manual on how to create, convert, or maintain your OLTR marriage, where you live full-time with your girlfriend or your wife, but you can have sex with other women while you live with her, and you can protect your finances in case of a divorce. So for the rest of this podcast, I'm going to give you the unabridged versions of chapters 1 and chapter 3 of the Ultimate Open Marriage Manual, available at open-marriage.com. So here we go. Chapter 1, Overview. I still vividly remember that day, despite it being over 20 years ago. I was a young man, several years into my first marriage. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall, my eyes squinting in a psychological agony that was so real it seemed to seep into my muscles. What have I done? I asked myself. What have I agreed to? Why did I agree to it? I pressed my hands into my face. I had realized that several years prior, during the excitement of the courtship, engagement, and wedding, I had agreed to an impossible, almost Faustian arrangement. I had agreed to never have sexual contact with any other woman besides my wife for the rest of my life. It made perfect sense at the time. We were having plenty of sex back then, so I didn't need anyone else. But now, here I was, several years into the typical marriage, and just like most typical husbands, my typical wife was saying no to sex more often than she said yes. What options did I have? I couldn't have sex with any other women, and I couldn't have sex with my wife because she was saying no. I had no other options other than to suffer. Oh my God, what have I done? No options wasn't exactly true. I did have one option. I could cheat. I could hook up with some other woman and hope the wife never found out. That led to the second part of the impossible arrangement I had agreed to. By getting legally, traditionally married, I had agreed to combine all of my finances with hers and enter into a three-way contract between me, her, and the government. That meant that if I got divorced, this woman would take my house, take my kids, take at least half of my retirement savings I had worked so hard for, and even possibly take half ownership in the company I built from scratch without any of her help. This was on top of the massive legal costs I would incur. So if I wanted to have sex when I needed it, my only option was to cheat. If I got caught, and almost all cheating husbands eventually get caught, I risked financial devastation on a mass scale unheard of in my entire life, not to mention the damage it would cause with my children. None of this was their fault. Why on earth did I agree to this? What the hell was I thinking? I twisted my torso in an effort to shake the pain. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this impossible arrangement, called traditional marriage, benefited my wife far more than it benefited me. As a matter of fact, it almost seemed like whomever invented this crazy system purposely went out of their way to make it as shitty a deal for the man as they possibly could. Imagine a girlfriend going to her boyfriend and saying, "Hey, sign this legal government contract that says you'll never have sex with anyone else but me, and you won't have any sex at all if I say no, and if we break up for any reason, you'll pay me thousands upon thousands of dollars, and if you don't pay me, you'll go to prison." Then worse, imagine the boyfriend saying, "Sure, sounds like a great deal," and then signing it with glee. You don't have to imagine it. It happens literally thousands of times a day all over the world. I loved my wife. I loved my kids. I enjoyed having a family. I enjoyed being married for the most part. None of that was the problem. I just wanted something fair. I just wanted to have sex on a regular basis and not have my entire financial life teetering on a precipice. Was that too much to ask? I guess it was. Why the hell did I agree to this? I had agreed to it so many years ago because no one informed me of any of these downsides. Back when I was a young man, engaged to be married under this model, not one man in my life sat me down and explained any of this to me. Not my dad, not my buddies, not my brothers, not my coworkers, not even any of my business mentors. They all just gave me plastic smiles and congratulated me when I told them I was getting married. This was despite the fact that many of them face these exact same problems or worse, and a decent number of them had already gone through horrible divorces. And so the cycle of pain for modern men continues. Unsurprisingly, I eventually got divorced. Once that crisis was over, I set on my mission to create a life of maximum freedom and long-term masculine happiness. A few years later, I called this lifestyle model Alpha Male 2.0. Over the past decade, I have lived a life greater than my wildest fantasies. I have written several books and online courses and maintained several blogs and coaching programs teaching men how to do the same thing. In my primary book, The Unchained Man, I describe the journey I went through in my dating life after my divorce to create multiple, long-term, non-monogamous relationships with women. After many years of living this wonderful life, I decided to settle down again. Only this time, I would do it in a way that made sense. I would do it in a way that wasn't unsustainable or unfair. I was a man in his 40s who wanted to share the rest of his life with one special woman, but do so in a way where I could still maintain my sexual freedom and not have any of my finances at risk. This was all several years ago. Today, I'm married again. My wife, Pink Firefly, is a pretty amazing woman. More importantly, though, my marriage today looks quite different than my old traditional marriage from so long ago. My marriage today is sexually open. This means I can have sex with any woman I want, whenever I want, without having to get any permission from my wife. As of this writing, I have sex with 2 or 3 other women on a regular basis, usually about once a week. That doesn't mean my wife and I don't have sex. We do, several times a week, often at her initiation, even though we've been together for almost 6 years. Unlike in traditional normal marriages, my wife's attraction for me hasn't decreased an inch. In many ways, it has actually increased over time. We also have completely separate finances. This means we never need to argue about money. Marriage experts and therapists tell us that money is one of the greatest causes for arguments and strife in marriage, as well as divorce. And Pink Firefly and I don't have that problem and never will. She spends her money 100% independently from me and I from her. No arguments needed on that front, ever. I have multiple legal, financial, logistical, and international barriers between my assets and hers. If there is ever a divorce, and I honestly hope there isn't, I love my wife very much, I don't lose a single penny of my money. Worst case, I will have to pay about $150 in court filing fees, and that's it. My sex life will continue like nothing happened, and my financial life will continue unharmed. I have designed the marriage to have minimum drama and arguments from the ground up. I have identified those things most married couples argue about and have either eliminated them completely or drastically reduced them. Instead of a typical marriage where the couple argues about stupid shit all the time, we have a marriage where we are extremely happy the vast majority of the time and real arguments are rare. When we do have a disagreement, instead of just screaming at each other for an hour like normal married people do, we have a specific proactive system that we follow that ensures we get to a rapid solution with minimal upset. No marriage is perfect, but I think ours is the best marriage that I think can be had in the Western world and in the modern era. Mutual friends and acquaintances, when they see how happy PF and I are together, tell us how jealous they are of our relationship and how they wish they had something like it. Fortunately, you can. In this book, I'm going to lay out specific, step-by-step instructions so you can build a marriage like this yourself. A marriage based on freedom, happiness, love, and sex, rather than the typical marriage based on conformity, slavery, arguing, and financial expense. Everything I have done can be replicated by any man willing to put in the work. It's not that hard, and the rewards are well worth it. Unlike most other men on the planet, I truly have the best of both worlds. A woman who I deeply love and want to share my life with, as well as massive sexual and financial freedom, all at the same time. More importantly, I'm not the only one. Millions of men all over the Western world, yes, millions, have non-monogamous marriages just like this, or very close to this, or a variation of this. I have communicated with hundreds of them over the past decade. People don't realize how common these marriages are because people in marriages like this keep them very quiet and pretend to be normal for fear of social ostracization. Fortunately for you, as an outcome independent alpha male 2.0, I don't have that problem, and I don't give a shit what people think about my marriage. I'm here to tell you exactly what I and others have done to create marriages like this so you can have one yourself. Read on. Chapter 3. The OLTR Marriage. Based on all of my research and experience over the last 13 years, I have come to discover that the OLTR marriage is the best, or at least bad depending on your point of view, method the modern-day man has of settling down with a woman in a long-term, cohabiting relationship. Again, I call this a marriage, regardless of what legalities, paperwork, or sexual arrangements are involved, since once you live with a woman full-time in a romantic context, you're living the lifestyle of a married man, whether you admit it or not. The OLTR marriage offers you the maximum amount of freedom possible while living with a woman, while simultaneously providing you the maximum amount of protection against all the usual problems and risks most men incur from a TMM, or the other non-monogamous marriage types that don't involve a separation of finances. It does so by removing the two great weapons of TMM that women can and will use against you to control you and reduce your long-term happiness. The two weapons of traditional monogamous marriage. There is nothing inherently wrong with marriage, that being the act of living with a woman full-time in a long-term relationship that provides stability and companionship, as well as a framework to raise children, if having kids is one of your goals. I think long-term pair bonding is great, and always have. It's also good for a stable society. The problem with traditional monogamous marriage is not the act of marriage itself, but that it places two powerful weapons in the hands of your wife. She can use these weapons against you whenever she pleases. Sadly, you don't also get two weapons that you can use against her. Nope, she has these two weapons and you have none. You're completely outgunned in a very real sense. These two weapons are restricting sex and divorce ruin. Restricting sex means that, in a monogamous marriage, your wife has 100% complete control over your entire sex life. You are not allowed to have sex with anyone else but her, and she decides when you're allowed to have sex with her. If she says no to sex, which of course she has every right to do, you go without sex completely. You could then cheat on her, but that creates an entirely new set of problems, not the least of which is activating divorce ruin, the other weapon she has. This means she has the power to completely remove sex from your life whenever she pleases. This is a vast and ridiculous amount of power. This means she can make all kinds of demands and threaten to remove all sex from your life whenever she wishes for any reason she wants. If you're like most men, you will comply with these demands so you don't have your only source of sex removed from your life. Any marriage where the woman has the power to do this never includes a man with any freedom, nor any great degree of long-term happiness, unless he has an unusually low sex drive, but for the rest of this book, I will assume that's not the case with you. The second weapon she has is divorce ruin. In a traditional marriage, and in many non-traditional marriages, you have signed a civil license with your government, meaning that the government has total authority over how your assets will be divvied up during a divorce. Not you, the government. In most jurisdictions all over the Western world, this means that if you get divorced, the government will force you to do one or more of these four things. Number 1, give her half of everything you own, regardless of who earned it or who owned it originally. This is called communal property. Number 2, pay her child support if you have any children with her, even if the children are not biologically yours. Number 3, pay her spousal support, traditionally known as alimony, meaning a monthly check you cut to her for a specified number of years, and in some cases, forever. Number 4, pay divorce attorneys thousands upon thousands of dollars to fight your wife in court over the above 3 items. As some men have observed, you don't get half of your stuff after a divorce, you only get a third, because the attorneys take the other third. Unless you are extremely wealthy or extremely poor, these things will cause sweeping devastation to your financial life, your long-term future, and even your retirement. I have seen powerful grown men break down into tears when they admit their savings and investments that they worked so hard for are now gone, or that they can't retire anymore, all because of a divorce. If you refuse to pay your wife any of these allotments, the government can and will put you in jail. I have spoken with many men who went to jail specifically for that reason. Even worse, most jurisdictions follow a system called no-fault divorce, meaning that you must give your wife all of these things even if you can conclusively prove in court that the divorce was 100% her fault. She can steal your money, physically abuse you, carry on a secret affair with her boss, have his kids and pretend they're yours, and you can show conclusive records, photo and video proof of all of this in court, and none of it matters. The judge just shrugs and tells you to pay her everything or you go to jail. Married women know all of this, or at least most of this. This gives them another weapon to use against their husbands. You'd better do X or Y, or I'll divorce you and take half your money. Like restricting sex, divorce ruin is an extraordinarily powerful tool your wife can use to control you. She won't hesitate to use it once the honeymoon phase of the marriage is over, usually well within 3 years or so. Picture two pistols, one labeled restricting sex and the other labeled divorce ruin. In a TMM, your wife has these two guns on her at all times, and she can draw them and point them at your head whenever she wants you to do just about anything. Remember, you don't have these weapons. You can't threaten to take half of her money in a divorce because she probably doesn't have any. And if you threaten to not have sex with her, she'll just laugh. That, in a nutshell, is the problem with TMM. Those two weapons. It renders the entire concept of a TMM fundamentally unfair to men in the modern era. However, there's an answer. All you need to do is create a marriage that is just like TMM, except with those two weapons removed. That's the OLTR marriage. The OLTR marriage. Very simply, the OLTR marriage is identical to a TMM, except the two weapons aren't a part of the relationship. It's just like any other marriage with two key differences. First, it's a sexually open marriage. The man and the woman, if she really wants, are allowed to have sex with other people as FBs within a short and simple set of ground rules. This completely removes the weapon of restricting sex. Your wife can't threaten to withhold sex from you, since you're allowed to get it from other women whenever you wish. Your wife can even stop having sex with you completely, and it doesn't threaten the marriage, since you can still get your sexual needs met elsewhere. Interestingly, this actually helps the wife, because she won't feel the constant pressure most wives in TMM feel to constantly sexually have to service their horny husbands. Statistically speaking, wives lose sexual desire for their husbands far sooner than husbands do for their wives. So having sex with a husband starts to feel like an obligation and a chore to wives in long-term marriages. A wife in an OLTR marriage never needs to feel this way. The second difference is that there are physical, legal, logistical, and in some cases international barriers between his money and her money. There are enforceable legal agreements and documentation in place that ensures that if a divorce or breakup occurs, the man doesn't have to pay the wife anything unless he chooses to. I emphasize the word enforceable since just getting a quote prenuptial agreement or the equivalent isn't enough to protect your finances in a divorce these days. In most parts of the Western world, prenups or their equivalents aren't enforceable at all, and most jurisdictions and judges will just throw them out if they're challenged. Instead, the OLTR marriage includes multiple layers of financial protection that are extremely difficult, if not impossible, to violate. I lay out exactly how to create these protections in future chapters. Other than those two differences, the OLTR marriage is just like a TMM in all respects. To the outside world, everyone will view the two of you as if you're in a TMM. In an OLTR marriage, you can still do things like get engaged, wear engagement rings, live in the same home, have a wedding, wear wedding rings, have her take your last name, introduce each other as husband and wife, live like husband and wife, have and raise kids, get medical coverage, take care of your wife financially if you want, and so on. There really is no difference between OLTR marriage and TMM except for those two aspects above. To illustrate this, here's a crazy example that happened to me many years ago. Way back when I was a beta male in my first marriage, a TMM, there was a married couple who lived a few houses down the street from us. They had 2 boys, and they were the happiest married couple on the entire block. They were very friendly, and my wife at the time and myself enjoyed them very much. A few years after we moved away from that house, but still lived in the area, I spoke with a friend of mine who still lived on that street. He revealed that this couple was actually in an OLTR marriage. They had a wide open marriage where the husband regularly had sex with other women, and they had some rock-solid prenuptial agreements in place. This is back when a prenup was all you needed. Today you need more than that to protect your money. I was stunned. I had known these two people for years and had no idea. Today, Pink Firefly and I live in a lower upper-class neighborhood filled with very normal people. PF is friends with most of them, and none of them have any idea that we are in an OLTR marriage. They all assume we have a TMM because that's exactly how we look to everyone. This is doubly amazing, considering I'm a public figure talking about non-monogamous relationships. This is yet another advantage of the OLTR marriage over other types of non-monogamous marriages I covered back in Chapter 2. It looks and feels normal. As an outcome independent alpha male 2.0, I personally don't give a shit what other people think about my marriage, but you might, and your wife or prospective wife most certainly will. This makes things easier for everyone. You can even raise kids in an OLTR marriage, and many people do. We'll discuss that aspect in Chapter 22. Having an OLTR marriage isn't perfect, and it's not a panacea, but it's far superior to having a TMM in just about every way. In terms of long-term cohabitation with a woman you love, it's as close to ideal a man can have in the Western world and in the modern era. The rest of this book will walk you through how to formulate and maintain your own OLTR marriage. You'll be shocked at how great it is once you see the results in your life. That concludes these 2 sample chapters of the Ultimate Open Marriage Manual, available in late May. I don't have a date yet as of this recording, but late May. You can go to open-marriage.com if you're interested in getting that book.